I was making an Asian coleslaw the other day, and I needed some sesame oil. So I looked in the pantry, didn't see any. And I looked on the shelves in the basement and didn't see any. Esther, do you know if we have any sesame oil? I yelled as I kept looking. And what do you think happened? Within about 30 seconds, she had found the bottle of sesame oil. I don't know about you, but this is an almost daily occurrence in my house. Have you seen my keys? Have you seen my wallet? Have you seen my phone? Sometimes I go up and down the stairs, I look in my closet, I look in the mudroom, I look in the office. Once in a while I find whatever I need, but much of the time, Esther, maybe sometimes the boys, they find it. So I don't know, is this only a guy thing? My prescription, still valid, but sometimes I just don't see what's right in front of me. Chavarim, I want to talk about seeing what's in front of us. Now, when it comes to something like sesame oil, I didn't look hard enough. But for this morning, that's not really the problem. Rather, in this case, it's more that I don't want to see. It's too painful to see, too hard to see. So I avert my eyes. And yet see, I and we must. I'm talking about seeing, noticing, suffering. There's so much suffering in our world today. There's suffering on an individual level, on a personal level. When someone faces illness, the death of a loved one, people who face poverty and hunger daily, who face depression. And then there's suffering on a large national level. I think, of course, first and foremost about Israel, and I think about Gaza. The list is long, and sometimes it feels like it's everywhere I look. It feels overwhelming, and I want to look away. We're not the first to struggle with this kind of scene. We read in our Parsha about Choshech, the 9th plague, the plague of darkness. Then God spoke to Moshe, saying, "Hold out your arm toward the sky, that there may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched." Moshe held out his arm toward the sky, and a thick darkness descended upon the land of Egypt for 3 days. And then here's our key verse, "And the people could not see one another. For 3 days they could not get up from where they are. Velo ra'u ish et achiv." Now, just in case it's not clear, who exactly are we talking about? Who couldn't see? It says that all of Egypt was covered in darkness. But when the Torah says ish lo ra'u, people couldn't see, it really means the Egyptians couldn't see. It's interesting that it refers to them as ish. The Jews living in Goshen, on the other hand, they could see, as the Torah says, but the Jews had light in their dwelling, uv'chol b'nei Yisrael haya or b'moshpotam. The darkness in Egypt was thick. But the real problem was not, do you see the sesame oil? Or where's my iPhone? The problem was not that they couldn't find their stuff or that they bumped into a couch. Lo ra'u ish et achiv, they couldn't see one another. This was not a matter either of lumens. The rabbis taught that even if they lit a candle, still the Egyptians couldn't see one another. This was a different kind of darkness, not about atmosphere, but about attributes. The Chidushei Harim, in the 19th century, the first Ger Rebbe, explained, the greatest darkness is when a person does not see his fellow and does not feel her suffering. This is what the Torah means, lo ra'u ish et achiv, they did not see. Their senses were dull. Ein ish ro'ed re'ehu ve'eno mishtatef b'tsa'ar hazulat, k'she'ein margishim b'tsa'arato shel chavero. Now, it shouldn't surprise us that the Egyptians couldn't see. After all, these were the same oppressors, the same enslavers who couldn't see the pain they were causing the Israelites. They didn't participate in their distress. They didn't notice or care about their suffering. This punishment then, therefore, is a midah keneged midah. It's really a measure for measure. And because they couldn't see, the Torah says, lo kamu. They couldn't get up. They were paralyzed. They were stuck in place. They were stuck in a place of tsa'ar, of narrowness, stuck in a place of hard-heartedness. They were stuck in a place of cruelty and of hatred. For their part, by contrast, the Torah says the Jews had light. And what did they do with that light during the 3 days of darkness? A remarkable midrash describes the scene. It's a teaching of Rabbi Nehorai, whose name Nehorai means light. Rabbi Nehorai claims that only 1 in 5 Jews left Egypt. Why so few? Because the others, he said, had separated themselves from the community. They didn't trust in God, and they didn't trust in those miracles. And so it was during these 3 days of darkness that thousands of Israelites died in Egypt and were buried there. Dafka during the plague of darkness. Rabbi Nehorai says that was so that the Egyptians wouldn't notice all of the Jewish funerals and gloat over the downfall of their enemies. What a profound and sad tale. Rabbi Nehorai subtly criticizes the Israelites who were blind to the signs of the coming of salvation. But the real Shanda, he says, are the Egyptians who were so depraved that could they see, they would rejoice over the Israelite deaths. Tragically, God hid the Israelite pain and sorrow, knowing that it would only embolden the enemies. According to the Torah, the Israelites could see. Now, the Torah says explicitly they had light in their dwellings, b'moshvotam. But the rabbis understand that quite expansively. It doesn't say that they had light in Goshen, in that region, rather, b'moshvotam, in their dwellings. That is to say, the rabbis teach that even if they went into an Egyptian dwelling, they could see while the Egyptians couldn't. K'shaya Yisrael b'beit hamitzraim b'mitzrayim haya or imo. It's almost as if the Israelites were wearing those kind of night vision goggles. They could see, but they were not seen. I'd like to imagine this scene with you by trying some bibliodrama, something I do once in a while at my Seder. So I want to invite you to take a moment to sit comfortably and to close your eyes if you're comfortable. To take a deep breath and to imagine that you're an Israelite. You've suffered tremendously under slavery. And now, with plague after plague, you are seeing your oppressors finally punished. And you're beginning to sense a light at the end of the tunnel. You're beginning to feel hope that there just might be a way out of this hell. And then the plague of darkness descends. All of Egypt is pitch black, a darkness so thick it's paralyzing. Miraculously, though, you have light. At first, you don't go out. But when you hear the death of your fellow Israelites, you tend to their burial. You offer comfort to your neighbors and friends. A day passes, and then another. On the 3rd day, you decide to see what's happening with your Egyptian neighbors. And so you walk across the way to their side. The streets are deserted. You arrive at their house. You open the door and you walk in. You see your neighbor. They can't see you, but you see them. What do you see? What do you see them doing? What is the expression on their faces? Look them in the eye, and what do you see? What do you hear? What do you think? What do you feel? I invite you to slowly come back to the sanctuary, to open your eyes. I want to invite us to take a moment to turn to your neighbor to discuss What did you picture? Did you see an ish, a person? Did you see your neighbor? Did you see them suffering under the weight of plague after plague? Could you see through your own pain of having just buried your own dead? I want you to have a conversation with your neighbor for a moment. So let's come back, and I'll be curious to hear about some of your vision, maybe during Kiddush. The way of the Egyptians is lo ra'u, to not see another person. To be a Jew, on the other hand, is to see, is to notice. Haya or imo, to have light, even when the rest of the world is dark, and to use that light to be able to see, to peer into the homes of your neighbors, perhaps even to see your enemy. Now, to be clear, unlike the New Testament, Judaism doesn't ask us to love our enemy. We're commanded to live and to protect our lives. In this story, God kills the Egyptian oppressors. At the same time, Rabbi Nehorai implied that we are forbidden for sure from rejoicing at their downfall. And I might even go a step further and say that we are to see not just our brethren, but even see our enemies. The Torah says, Ki tetzei ish lemilchama al oivecha. It's translated when you go to war against your enemy, but that word al oivecha suggests that if you must go to war, go above your enemy. Don't stoop to their level. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it's saying to fight a moral war. Though fight we must, we cannot be blind to suffering. As hard as it is, as righteous as is our cause, we must see the impact. Because if we're blind, if we can't see, then we get stuck. A few weeks back, Rachel Goldberg Poland, whose son Hirsch, as you know, was taken captive, she wrote a poem that is absolutely remarkable. It expresses a level of compassion that I have to admit is hard for me to muster, and I'm not sure that it's representative of most Israelis today. Rachel has an ability to see through the darkness of our day, to see and to express herself in a way that is arresting and challenging and inspiring. I think I have a feeling I know what she would see if she was peering into the home of the Egyptians. For recently she wrote, if your moral compass is attuned to the suffering of only one side, your compass is broken, and so is your humanity. This poem she wrote is called One Tiny Seed. She wrote it, directed it toward a woman in Gaza, and she shared it in Geneva before the United Nations to mark the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. She writes, there's a lullaby that says your mother will cry 1,000 tears before you grow to be a man. I've cried 1,000,000 tears in the last 67 days. We all have. And I know that way over there, there's another woman who looks just like me, because we're all so very similar. And she's also been crying. All those tears, a sea of tears, they all taste the same. Can we take them, gather them up, remove the salt, and pour them over our desert of despair, and plant one tiny seed? A seed wrapped in fear, trauma, pain, war, and hope, and see what grows? Could it be that this woman, so very like me, that she and I could be sitting together in 50 years laughing without teeth because we've drunk so much sweet tea together, and now we are so very old, and our faces are creased like worn-out brown paper bags, and our sons have their own grandchildren, and our sons have long lives, one of them without an arm, but who needs 2 arms anyways? Is it all a dream, a fantasy, a prophecy? One tiny seed. Chaverim, in the Mishnah Masechet Shabbat, the rabbis debate what may be used for lighting Shabbat candles. They say no to tar and to tallow because they burn with a dirty, smelly, inconsistent flame. Olive oil, on the other hand, is kosher, as is sesame seed oil. Its light is clean and bright. To be a Jew is to have light, haya or imo, and to use that light to see others. Let us see those that we know, those close by, and those that we don't know far away, to see their pain and their suffering, to see the tiny seed of fear, trauma, pain, war, and hope within each one, and to nurture its growth, not just on Tu B'Shvat, but in the days ahead, so that one day we might shine a light that is clean and bright, that illuminates our lives and our world with peace. Amen. Amen.